Tonight we're going to talk about this measure, this initiative. We're thankful that you showed up. Some of the things we're going to do is we're going to share, Stephen and myself and Jeff are going to share a bit of why we got involved with this, but then we also want to give you an opportunity to do that as well. Why have you come? And Jeff is kind of the brains behind it, and so if you're, my assumption is you got a lot of questions about how this works. Is this legal? What's going to happen? What if it wins? What, Jeff's the brains, and we'll engage in a bit of that conversation as well. So should I just start?
Yeah, why don't you start talking about why you're here, other than that you run the church?
Yeah, I'm here for several reasons, but quickly and to the point is 55 years old and my growing disillusionment with the capacity of our political parties to initiate the kind of change that conforms to the kind of values I have and the kind of America I want to see, the kind of city I want to see. And I've been increasingly frustrated about that, and I get really frustrated with protest marches that seem to go nowhere, and what's the follow through, and got really excited about Occupy. I mean, it's one of the, finally people seem to wake up and there was energy, and I'm still hopeful. But in all of that, a couple years ago, through Jeff, I went to a democracy school. And the democracy school was talking about deep structural change. That if you really want to incorporate your moral values into the way that we live in a pluralistic society, you've got to wrap your mind and your hands around the law. What are the laws that shape how we live and govern how we live? And so out of that, I began to think a little differently about what would be effective and what is not effective in terms of change. I have been very disillusioned with the increase of corporate power in this country and the literal bribing of the political process. And I've come to a belief that the corporations themselves, corporate power, this notion of a corporate person is about as anti-American as it gets. And I also believe it's anti-human. In my tradition, in a biblical tradition, the New Testament tradition, these kind of entities are called principalities and powers. And I think in the Hebrew scriptures, these would be, this is what the prophets would talk about when they talked about idolatry. The notion of creating a fictional corporate person is no different than building a tower to Babel or setting up a statue of an idol and worshiping it. It has no human feeling. All it knows is the price of lunch, to use Bruce Coburn's lyric. And so if we are now moving in a direction where we're going to be governed by entities that aren't flesh and blood and bone, entities that are mortal, like we are mortal, I think we're moving into a very dangerous time of human history. So Jeff and I were talking, and Jeff is the genius, I think, behind this, and he began to talk about, well, let's begin to organize people around limiting and ending corporate rights and ending corporate personhood. And there's lots of groups around Seattle that are involved in that, and we wanted we asked ourselves the question: what can bring us together? What's a match that can light a fire to get the whole town talking about this in an organized way? And who knows what would come out of that conversation? So how do you even begin the conversation? And that's when, at least for me, this is my interpretation, Jeff might have a different one, that's when we began to realize, well, we have to change the deep structures. And part of the deep structures, and Jeff will be able to tell you some more about what happens when people like ourselves, normal everyday people who don't have millions of dollars and we don't have our own person our political person that we can buy and will do what we ask them to do. What can we do as a people to change the way we think about how we govern ourselves? And so for me, the measure 103 is an opportunity to put the ball on the field and begin to push it. And no matter where it goes, I see nothing but good coming from it, because I think it will be a call to people of similar values. My hope is that we will gather the signatures. My hope is that it will be on the ballot. My wild hope is that it could possibly win. But what I personally am willing to settle for is to put the ball in the field of play, so that we can begin to call people of similar values together and start a movement. I'll end with this. It took 40 years it took 40 years, my language, I need a better word, I'm told, but it took 40 years for the fascists to dismantle our democracy and have their coup d'etat in our country. And I think it will take a while to get it all back, but limiting corporate rights, I think, is a step in the right direction. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I appreciate your interest in coming. So, Stephen?
Yes, also thank you all so much for being here. I'm here as the sort of young person, student. I'm here as a young person who feels disenfranchised, who has lost hope in our country generally. Kind of like Rich, you just said, when corporations rule our politicians and our mass media, I feel that my voice has been sort of drowned out of the equation. And, oh, thanks. And I think a lot of people, young people, feel similarly. So that's why I'm on board with Initiative 103, because it would restore my voice. I think that if we love anyone, then we will use our voice to make the world a fairer and cleaner place for the people we love. So it makes sense to me that people would use our voice to support taking away these judge-made corporate rights, and that we, the people, would support a police force that actually serves and protects us and doesn't just pepper spray our pastors when they feel like it. We saw something like Initiative 103 working in Pittsburgh, where they banned fracking in the entire city. I mean, that gives me a lot of hope. Fracking, so yeah, hammering away at the earth to get gas. In Pittsburgh, so they did that, and they came really close on their second try in Spokane. Maybe some of y'all saw. They were like, what was it, like 49%?
1,000 votes they lost by.
They lost by 1,000 votes in Spokane this last time. So it's doable, it's getting close to home. And wouldn't it be great if we did it and put Seattle on the cusp of this change and replenish democracy here in our own backyard? So to quote the amazing poet June Jordan, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. So let's do it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Rich. I'm Jeff Reifman, and despite what Rich told you, I'm actually the beauty of the operation. But that's obvious. You know, you can believe your ears or you can believe your eyes. So if I'm the brains, we're in trouble. So I'm going to tell you just a brief story about why I'm here, and then I'm going to talk to you more in detail about the initiative. And I'm also going to answer questions. We'll have a lot of time for questions, and then I hope that you'll stay and mingle to talk with each other and meet each other. So I used to work at Microsoft. I came to Seattle about 20 years ago. I got to work at Microsoft for 8 years when it was a very small company. I've been very fortunate, and it's allowed me it's supported me in doing my activism. Around 2004, I had studied journalism, and I pitched an article to the Seattle Weekly on Microsoft. And one of the articles I wrote for them was, what kind of citizen is Microsoft? And in investigating that story, we found out that Microsoft had been recording about half of their revenue in Nevada to avoid a tax we have here in Washington called the royalty tax. And at the time, Microsoft was going around talking about how they care about education and how they were going to get more involved in the state and state affairs because they have such a prominent role here. And I found out that they were saving about $40 to $70 million a year in tax savings, and that the state possibly could be cracking down on this. And that was kind of, then a few years went by, and I think it was about 2009 that we started to have about a $2.25 billion budget here in the state, and cuts were being made to education. So I started tabulating the numbers, like how much money has Microsoft saved in all these years? They'd been doing this tax dodge out of Nevada since 1998, so it had been, let's see, about 10 or 11 years. And I found out that it was over $1 billion that the company had saved. And as I investigated the legal aspects, I saw that actually the Department of Revenue here probably could make a case to collect that money. So I started a blog, which is what some of us technology people and journalistic people do, and it's called MicrosoftTaxDodge.com. And I started telling everyone I know in Washington, I thought, wow, we have a $2 billion budget, and Microsoft saved $1 billion in taxes, and they have earned $480 billion in profit during this time period. And so this seems like a no-brainer to me. And Microsoft, they keep saying they care about our community and they care about education, so they want to do the right thing. And I sent letters to the legislature, and I told them about what I'd found, and I shared my data, and everything was open and transparent so everybody could see this. And what happened is that the chair of the Finance Committee of the Washington State Legislature, a Democrat named Ross Hunter, changed the royalty tax so that instead of being a tax on sales to worldwide customers, it's now just a tax on sales to Washington State customers. So this tax that Microsoft had been dodging on this much of their revenue was now a tax just on this much of their revenue. So essentially, they're not really dodging the tax anymore. And then shortly after that, the governor appointed another ex-Microsoft employee to run the tax department. I actually used to work with her. And so what that taught me about the legislature and about the state government here is that even though we tend to think we have a great government here and a great Democratic Party here, when it comes to issues of tax fairness, how we collect money from people and how we spend money on things that matter, like education, social services, that the state government wasn't going to help us. It wasn't going to do the right thing. And I realized that I had to take a different approach. And also during this time, I'd been studying with Thomas Lindsay and going to their democracy schools and learning about their group, the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, and how they were approaching change and their theory of change. And they'd sort of given up on the federal government as a way to make change. They sort of see Congress and as well the state legislatures as entities that have been bought out by corporate influence and can't be depended on any longer for change. And so that's what led me here tonight, and that's what's the spirit and like what I've learned and what they've learned and what's behind sort of the thinking in this initiative process that we'll be talking more about. So I want to thank you all for coming, because I bet that each of you are here because you have a feeling about corporate power as having grown to be too much. That you feel that something's wrong in our state, in our city, larger in our country, and that things need to change. And probably you feel like you're not seeing a good solution. So that's essentially where we start tonight, which is that we're trying to take a new approach. So what Initiative 103 would do is we've written an ordinance that's based on the work of Thomas Lindsay's group. It's very similar to ordinances that other groups are working with, similar to the group in Spokane, Envision Spokane, that has twice tried to pass this at the ballot. And as Stephen was alluding to, they only lost by 1,000 votes in November. And we're trying to gather enough signatures in Seattle to place our ordinance on the ballot. And what this ordinance would do, it would start by taking on corporate personhood. It would make corporate personhood essentially illegal in Seattle. And it would ban spending on elections by corporations in Seattle. So for example, when we talk about the liquor privatization initiative, Costco spent $22 million last year to get that passed. They pretty much, a few years ago, we tried to pass a plastic bag ban in Seattle. The American Chemistry Council, the lobbyists for them, they spent, I think, $1.4 million to defeat that initiative in Seattle. None of that would be able to happen anymore if we pass this initiative. It would ban lobbying by corporations in Seattle, except in public forums. So if Microsoft thinks they have an important initiative, they can talk about it in public. Just like we have to line up to speak at our council meetings, they get to line up and speak at our council meetings. And maybe this will lead to changes. They can still have meetings with councilmen, but maybe they'll be broadcast over the internet and scheduled ahead of time so that it's open and transparent. The other thing that this ordinance does is it establishes a floor of rights for our community. And these rights are all related to protecting rights to fair elections, rights to clean government, and rights for nature, which the environment in the Puget Sound area has been gradually declining, despite efforts by a lot of different groups and despite laws that we have on the books. So what Rights for Nature does is it actually gives us a legal way to protect the environment. It gives actual police accountability for citizens. Stephen was alluding to Pastor Rich was pepper sprayed at a democracy rally, was it last year or early this year? It would provide constitutional rights for workers in the workplace. It would give neighborhoods the rights to approve zoning that might affect them. It would give us guarantees around internet access. So if you've heard the term network neutrality, it would prevent our broadband providers from essentially shutting down small publishers like bloggers like me by charging big publishers money for the fastest delivery. All of these rights are related to democracy. Having government operate transparently, having people's rights elevated above corporate rights, all these things work together to ensure that we make decisions in our government in a better way. So in order to get this initiative on the ballot, we need about 20,600 signatures over the next 5 months. And I think that's very doable. But I want to talk about our goals. Like Rich said, we may not win. Like Spokane's done this twice and they've lost twice. But in the process, they've generated discussion about the issues of democracy, corporate influence on our government and our community, how to protect the environment. What we're trying to do, and by you being here tonight, is to elevate the issue of corporate influence on our communities to a high level of discussion in and around Seattle. So if there's anything that you leave here tonight with is hopefully knowledge that you've gained or excitement to go and talk to more people about this. If we do get this on the ballot, it will be a whole nother challenge to get people to vote for it. But really right now, all that we're focusing on is to build as broad a base as we can, to gather the signatures, and to raise awareness about these issues, because these issues aren't going away. I don't believe that the way we run our city, the way we run our state or our country is sustainable. And I think we see this in a lot of the problems that are happening around us. Things have to change, and this is one way that we can make law. Well, let me read to you first. How many of you heard about the Montana State Supreme Court putting down a decision that challenged Citizens United? Yeah, a lot of you. So actually, all they're challenging is a very small part of Citizens United. But I wanted to read to you a couple of paragraphs from one of the judges in that case. His name is the Honorable James Nelson. He says, and this is the dissenting opinion, so he actually disagreed with challenging Citizens United. Lastly, I am compelled to say something about corporate, quote, personhood. While I recognize that this doctrine is firmly entrenched in the law, I find the entire concept offensive. Corporations are artificial creatures of law. As such, they should enjoy only those powers, not constitutional rights, but legislatively conferred powers that are concomitant with their legitimate function, the being limited liability investment vehicles for business. Corporations are not persons. Human beings are persons, and it is an affront to the inviolable dignity of our species that courts have created a legal fiction which forces people, human beings, to share fundamental natural rights with soulless creations of government. Worse still, while corporations and human beings share many of the same rights under the law, they clearly are not bound equally to the same codes of good conduct, decency, and morality, and they are not held equally accountable for their sins. Indeed, it is truly ironic that the death penalty and hell are reserved only to natural persons. Regardless of my disagreement with the views of Citizens United's majority, the fact remains that the Supreme Court has spoken. It has interpreted the protections of the First Amendment vis-a-vis corporate political speech. Agree with its decision or not, Montana's judiciary and elected officers are bound to accept and enforce the Supreme Court's ruling, in the same way that this court demands obedience to its ruling, like them or not. I disagree with the court's decision to parse Citizens United in a fashion so as to, quote, send a message or to be the next, quote, test case before the Supreme Court. In my view, this approach is disingenuous. Citizens United is the law of the land, and this court is duty-bound to follow it. When this case is appealed to the Supreme Court, as I expect it will be, a summary reversal on the merits would not surprise me in the least. So essentially what he's saying, he totally disagrees with corporate personhood. It offends him. And as a Supreme Court judge of the state of Montana, he feels powerless to do anything about it. We are not powerless here in Seattle. We have the right to write an ordinance, to gather signatures for it, to get it on the ballot, to convince our neighbors to vote for it, and to pass it and make it law. So if the citizens of Seattle say that we believe that corporate personhood and corporate rights should not be greater or more powerful than people's rights, we have the right to do that. And no one in Seattle, in our city, can tell us differently. So that's the organizing approach to what we're doing. The mechanics of what we're doing and why I hope that you've come is to help us tell people about this effort. The Occupy movement in Seattle and around the world has raised awareness for the corporate power, the wealth gap, and some of these issues. And so now is an opportune time to be talking to our friends and neighbors about corporate power and corporate harm. So I hope that you will leave here and help in connecting more people to this effort, in helping us in gathering signatures, and helping us place this on the ballot. And in the process of that, we're going to become kind of a lightning rod of attention for this issue. It's likely that at some point the Seattle media will take note about what we're doing and talk about this and raise this issue for discussion. And then probably the national media, if we get this on the ballot. And the advantage of that is that other communities will start to do this too, because they also know that things need to change. In Portland, they're talking about doing an initiative just like this. In Spokane, they're continuing to work on an initiative just like this. In Bellingham, some of you may have heard about the coal train. There's a ton of coal in the ground in Montana that the property owners want to sell to China. And in order to do that, they not only have to build a deep water port in Bellingham, but basically they have to have round-the-clock trains coming through Bellingham, and some of them will come through Seattle. And so there's a group in Bellingham that has written an ordinance to ban this practice and strip corporations of their personhood rights and other federal privileges that they often use to overturn community rule. So we're not alone. The Northwest is becoming a center of power building around this issue. When we talk to people about this stuff is radical. We're so immersed in a culture of corporate influence, corporate power, corporate fashion, money, consumption. It's hard for people to even see it. And if you will find that people won't agree with you when you talk to them about this. They won't like the way that you did this. In Seattle, we have a very educated city. We're very blessed with Microsoft and Boeing and Amazon and all these great biomedical companies as well. So we have an incredibly talented pool of people who are very well educated, and they are taught to poke holes in every idea and every new idea. And so as you talk to people about Initiative 103, they will tell you what's wrong with it. But what they're really doing is, they may have valid concerns about this or that, but it's also a way to keep their distance from some of the harms that corporations are doing in our community. So Like in Puget Sound, there's 86 orcas in the resident pods that are already federally endangered species and likely to be extinct within 100 years. It breaks my heart that the orcas may go extinct, that we don't have any laws on the books to help protect the species of Puget Sound. 10 species in Puget Sound are endangered or soon to be listed as endangered. It breaks my heart when I see there's a homeless man when I drive down Aurora towards Denny. He has tattered pants, and often I see him with his head and torso tucked into a vent on the hotel there to stay warm. And you can almost see the shadow of the new Gates Foundation headquarters casting over where this guy stands. And it bothers me that we can't do anything very easily to help him. So when Microsoft has been tied to this tax dodging, and in the last couple of years, our state budget has grown to $4 billion, it bothers me and it upsets me that we still have all these social problems when the foundation gets to privately decide how to spend the profits that Microsoft has saved. I think that's wrong. So I want to talk briefly about ways that you can help and get involved, and then we'll open it up to questions. First of all, the petition and how it works. If you haven't seen, over in the corner, my housemate Carissa over here has petitions that you can sign tonight if you're a Seattle registered voter, and she'll be taking pictures if you're okay with that, and we'll be putting them on Facebook. You can download the petition and print it out from the website, i103.org. Legally, the petition page has to include the full text of the ordinance, and so that's why it's on the back here. And it has to have all of this legal text as well. So we have 3 different petitions that you can download. One is for people who just want to do a little bit. I hope all of you can get 10 people to gather 5 signatures at the very least. So we have a 5 signature form. We also have a 10 signature form. So if you're feeling more ambitious, that's probably a great size for you. We also, if you just want to save paper and you're going to gather a lot of signatures, we were able to fit 14, and you can download any of these. It's also really important just to share the website, i103.org. So if you have an email list of family, friends, colleagues, please, when you get home, email this to them. Tell them something emotionally that you care about our community and corporate influence that might be harming something in our community, because I think it's too easy for people to, I think if you want to reach people, you have to speak from the heart. You have to talk to them about what matters to you, about why you're concerned, about what brought you out tonight. We also have a Facebook page that you can get to from the website, and that's another great way to share this with people so they learn about it. Our effort is really just building awareness and getting as many people involved in this as we can. In the back, we also have petitions for you to take home, and we have these commitment cards that if you're willing to commit tonight to recruiting a certain number of people to gather signatures and are willing to write that down, that would be great. Or if you're willing to gather a certain number of signatures yourself, make a commitment to that and let us know. Make sure you put your email address on that card so we can get in touch with you and keep track of people's commitments. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. And I'm glad to talk more about the initiative, more about the process, or any other questions that you have. And maybe Stephen and Rich could also come up if you want to help field questions. Yeah, Elizabeth? Sure. I think that's a great concern, and I've heard that question before. Also, to repeat the question, Elizabeth is asking, she's concerned about the neighborhood approval portion of the ordinance that gives neighborhoods the opportunity to vote on major zoning changes. And she's concerned that this might prevent important facilities from being built around like halfway houses or treatment centers or homeless shelters, that sort of thing.
Affordable housing.
What's that? And low-income housing, yeah. So if you actually read the ordinance around this clause, it says that neighborhood majorities shall have the right to approve all zoning changes proposed for their neighborhood involving significant non-governmental, commercial, industrial, or residential development. So I believe that there's space in the ordinance for the council to package zoning changes around these non-governmental purposes that would be excluded from the ordinance's impact. But what this is really written to prevent is, let's say a group of big box stores want to put a mall parking lot in a residential community, that they shouldn't be able to do that without the neighbors having a say. And I would also go so far as to say that, because I hear this a lot, we either believe in democracy or we don't believe in democracy, and I think that it's important to bring communities into the mix of these kinds of decisions. And so sometimes it takes a long time to make these decisions, but we need to have really compelling arguments on why these things are important, and we need to sell communities on them. So I both believe that the ordinance protects some of the things that you're concerned about, and I also believe that we have to respect that communities should have some say in what happens in their neighborhoods. This has come up like around the Roosevelt Transit Center that's going in, because I know that there's people who want increased density there. This ordinance would radically change how things are done in our city. And a lot of decisions have already been made using our current model of decision making. And so it's sometimes hard to imagine, like, if this law was in place when we planned the light rail route, for example. Like, it's possible that communities that don't want high density transit in their neighborhood, we might have routed the light rail differently. We might have made decisions differently if the laws on the books were different when we were planning those things. So I think it's also important to remember how things might be different if a law like this was the way that we operated in the city. Does that answer your question?
I'm still nervous.
Still nervous? So we were talking about the wording of the ordinance. Do you feel that that doesn't account for it? Sure. This isn't easy, and if this ordinance passes, it will be subject to interpretation. It can also be changed in the future. The council will have to write more laws around this to flesh it out, and there will be opportunity for people to be heard about how they would like to see this implemented across the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, is it Lisa?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if I can restate your question, you're asking, is there an organizing framework for people sort of involved in leading this and making decisions that may come up over the next 6 months? And then also, do we have a strategy in place for responding tactically to, say, if this hits the media and is misinterpreted, or if something needs to be addressed? Yeah, so we're going to be setting up a meetup like every 2 weeks that will move around the city to reach different people. And then we'll also be having regular organizing meetings that you're welcome to attend. We haven't really sorted out the location. Yeah.
And one more, just to add one more that I'm working on, actually, and probably using this very space that you're in, and that is I'm wanting to get together a continual series of folks who will come in here who will talk about corporate rights, people's rights versus corporate rights. So, for example, a friend of mine, a person who I like a lot, and I think many of you might know, John Burbank in the Economic Opportunity Institute, or Craig Salins, to have folks come in here so that there can be a place for ongoing conversation about what the role of corporations are in our society and how we are organizing in this town against them. And I think, Jay, it's called GMOP, right? GMOP is another group just offering public space so that through this whole campaign of collecting signatures, there's also going to be opportunities for ongoing education, which I think is hugely important, because I have a hard time getting my mind around the legalities. I know my morals, legalities are harder.
Yeah, it's been pretty informal, and so we're organizing now, and we'll be trying to formalize that more. We'll have regular leadership meetings that people are welcome to attend. We just haven't set up a schedule for those. In terms of the signature gathering process is based on the initiative that we filed, and so it's sort of moving forward, and so it's really a tactical effort right now to, as broadly as we can, build a base to gather signatures. But we will definitely be having a regular meeting around like questions that come up around.
We'll have a little sign-up sheet for email addresses at the back and can keep you connected.
Around organizing questions too. And then in terms of like what Rich was talking about, next week we're going to be talking at the Green Party event. So if you're interested in learning more and learning about other other people doing work in this area. John Burbank will be on a panel. I'll be on the panel. There's a couple of people from Move to Amend on the panel. And that'll be at the Finney Ridge Community Center next Wednesday, I think in the evening. The Green Party Facebook page has information about that. Yeah, it sounds like you want to be involved. And yeah, we definitely, that's why we're having everybody here. And that's why we'll have time for people to talk after. This is, the people who are here, I think they feel affected by this issue. They care. And so, this is an opportunity to begin those discussions. And as Rich said, this is a long-term effort to build an organization of people who care about this issue. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
And just real quickly, and then this man wanted to ask a question. Jeff, myself, Stephen, and Shannon.
You know.
So I've met her one time. Basically, what you have right here is 4 citizens that give a damn. And so, how do you get something started? And we did flirt around with other groups, just talking with other groups. And what we found is they're moving too slow. And not to criticize them. I have an institution. I know slow institutions, but we don't have enough time to go slow. We've got to start pushing this ball now.
And what's different about this ordinance is this takes the discussion and it takes the law to the center of corporate power, and it attempts to reframe it and rewrite it at the city level where we still have the right to do so, where we still feel like we have influence to do so. And that's what's really powerful about this. And our efforts now is to just try to get people talking about this, try to get people. So a lot of you have had hands up, so we'll try to go through. So
okay,
you were Bob?
Yeah.
Bob.
You said neighborhood vote earlier. My question is, who does the gerrymandering?
In terms of neighborhoods, I think.
Well, you're going to have an election. There's always going to be a boundary.
Yeah, let me address that. So Bob's question is concerning how neighborhoods are defined in like the boundaries for neighborhoods and whether someone might manipulate that. So the ordinance doesn't speak to neighborhood definitions. Right. In Seattle, we have a pretty strong history of neighborhood definitions and boundaries already, and the ordinance relies on that. So our assumption is that those boundaries wouldn't change. And so, we can't be sure the council wouldn't try to gerrymander, but that's not something that we've tried to restrict against or to, that isn't something that we've addressed in this ordinance. But based on the history of Seattle neighborhoods, we believe that.
You're going to just assume that it's the existing neighborhoods, even though it might be right on the corner of 3 neighborhoods, but it's actually only in 1.
Yeah, that's a good issue. We don't address that in the ordinance. So who else? You've had your hand up. Is it Tom?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have filed this ordinance together, and now we're starting a citizens' effort to gather signatures to place it on the ballot. And that's pretty much the extent of our organization. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what's been done. So the question was, do we have a plan to get other individuals, other organizations involved in this effort to expand the number of resources working on getting this on the ballot and getting it passed? Let's see. So we will definitely want to hear from people who want to be involved in the leadership, and this meeting is an opportunity to meet us and to connect and to network and expand. We're also doing a lot of events. So I've started doing house events where I'm talking to more people, and hopefully some of you will do house events where you're talking to people. We've approached organizations, and we're continuing to approach organizations in Seattle, but I will tell you that until this effort has a certain amount of momentum from the citizens and grassroots efforts, I think involvement by traditional nonprofits, by unions, is going to be limited simply because this is too radical for most of them and the way that they operate. So I'm hopeful that they will come on board, but I have not seen their ability, like they are focused on lobbying the state legislature mostly. They are focused on the old model of change, and I don't believe that model works, and I don't have the energy or resources to work on those organizations and changing them to a more effective model. And so we are citizens who think that making this law this way is one approach. We may be wrong. If we fail, we may have to start over. We may have to approach this differently. But this is where we feel like we're putting a stake in the ground. We're going right to the core of corporate power and trying to raise awareness for these issues in Seattle. Did I answer your question completely, or was there a part of it that I missed?
No, I think basically what you said is not really
Well,
time because you don't think they're on board.
Well, actually, so I'm talking to the Green Party next week. The Green Party is a very leftist group, and they may decide to get on board. I'm going to be attending the Occupy May Day strike. I'm going to be trying to talk to their organizers. We've reached out to them. We hope that this is something that appeals to them. Those are very left organizations. I've been talking to unions. I've been talking to nonprofits. I have meetings set up all month. As people hear about this, I will have more meetings. I will go have coffee with anyone. I will go visit these places and talk. I talked at independent high school yesterday. I'll talk to anyone, and I hope that as our leadership gets involved, that they'll go talk to people. But what I'm saying is that we have seen a strong conservative streak in Seattle organizations, Seattle nonprofits. They are tied to a model of organizing that I don't believe has been effective over the recent history. And they are not structured well to approach something brand new. And so I'm going to talk to anyone that will hear me. I'm not going to leave the success of this initiative to convincing organizations to change their strategy.
Well, I wasn't proposing you do.
Okay. So you had your hand up. Yeah. So Bill's question was, how can we get nonprofits, unions, other organizations that might traditionally support ending corporate personhood to really put their organizational might behind it? So let me just do a brief exercise with you. Why are you here? Like, what do you care about? What brought you here? So do you know Wash Clean? The group, so Rich was talking about Craig Salins. He's with the group Wash Clean. I think they'll be at the Green Party event. They have been working on public campaign finance reform for over a decade. I've actually volunteered with them in Oregon in the past. It would be great to have their support. I'm not sure, they're not there yet. So people like you going to talk to them and saying, like, I'm concerned about spending on elections, I'm concerned about lobbying. I think that this ordinance is a way to change that in Seattle. I think that this is a model that's different. Talking to them that you care about that, I think they need to hear from people like you. And Washington, maybe, I'm just singling them out as an example. But all of you here, if you have issues you care about and organizations you work with, I would encourage you to give them a call tomorrow. If you've donated to them, given them money, given them time, volunteered, tell them about this and tell them you care about it. Tell them that you think it's a new approach. Tell them that you think they should listen and consider getting involved. Definitely. So Tom Lindsay, who was here a few months ago, he runs Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund and has been doing this work around the country. And actually, he's the person that went down to Ecuador and helped them put rights for nature in their new constitution. He talks a lot about how groups like the Sierra Club have turned into their biggest enemies in certain areas where they've tried to organize, because the Sierra Club works in a strategy that works with the federal and state legislatures, which works in a system that often the odds are against us as community organizers, because the systems have so much financial leverage from corporate power. So I would love to work with every grassroots and nonprofit in Seattle. And I'll talk to anybody. I'm not going to close the door on anyone. But to get this on the ballot, we need 21,000 valid signatures, which means maybe 25 to 30,000 signatures. And we can do that in the next 6 months just amongst citizenry. And so I'm not trying to take on additional battles, but I would really love your help in spreading the word and bringing those people on board. And the way you start by doing it is being a stakeholder and telling them that you care, telling them why you care. Because you're not going to win with intellectual arguments. You're going to win by talking to them emotionally from the heart. You too. Let me ask her for she was, yeah.
A really concrete question.
Sure. What's your name?
Sally.
Sally. So the first question was, will we have talking points and a simplified version for signature gatherers to be able to more easily interact with people they're recruiting or talking to get signatures? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So on the website, we already have a frequently asked questions page, which is pretty detailed, and then we will be creating a talking points page pretty soon. And there's also a bullet point summary of what's in the initiative. So that's definitely on our list. The second question was, are we trying to So basically, are we trying to end all corporate rights, or are we trying to end corporate personhood?
I'm not a representative of the corporate.
Sure.
Because I believe fascism is already here, loud and clear. It's not just from the government, it's from the people. So, but anyway.
Yeah, well, so the T-shirt may be a little more absolute. We're still working on different language to communicate with people. End corporate personhood is something that a lot of people are familiar with. But it's also really important to emphasize that when you take away personhood, there's also lots of other ways that corporations can overturn democratic rule. There's, and I won't lecture here, but there's things like the contracts and commerce clauses of the Constitution. There's the ability of corporations to use licenses and permits to overturn community rule. So that's one of the reasons why this ordinance has some additional language in it for stripping corporations of rights, and it's based on the Community Environmental Legal Defense's experience over the last decade. In terms of your question about are we trying to overturn Citizens United, this makes it illegal for corporations to spend money on elections in Seattle, and in that way it directly confronts settled federal law around those issues. So yeah, we're definitely trying to give the voters of Seattle a chance to say whether or not the citizens of Seattle think our community is better off with corporate personhood and with corporate speech in elections or not. And when people sign, I'll also make this point, there's nothing in the law that says that every signature gatherer has to tell the people signing everything about the ordinance. I mean, that could take 10 minutes a person. Your job is to tell them, to ask them whether they think this issue is important enough to put on the ballot. No one's passing law by signing the petition. What they're doing is they're saying, I think the voters of Seattle should have a chance to decide this issue.
Key point, very good.
You have your hand up for a long time. What's your name?
Linda.
Linda, thanks for coming.
I know that they had success in Pennsylvania with this, but I also heard something, and I just don't know I don't know much about it, but I heard that the state legislature also came back.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah,
Oh,
I can talk to that briefly. So the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund actually started, her question is, she's heard that this has worked in Pennsylvania and that the legislature has been recently taking steps to sort of fight back and overturn the work of the communities. So the CELDIF, the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, they've, with over 100 townships, which is the smallest unit of government in Pennsylvania, have passed ordinances that ban certain corporate practices. Some are like 5,000 head hog farms. Some are, in Pittsburgh, it's banning fracking, which is harmful natural gas drilling. And so the fracking ban in Pittsburgh was passed unanimously by the Pittsburgh City Council. And so what the lobbyists have done is, the corporate lobbyists working with the state legislature, they've actually gotten the state legislature to pass a bill. It's called Act 13 or Measure 13. And what it does is it makes it illegal for communities to pass laws that regulate resource extraction. And so this is a much longer discussion, but the theory of change behind this work is that we either live in a democracy or we don't. And so when we frame issues in a simple form, like Initiative 103 says that people's rights should be elevated above corporate rights, and that we have the right to fair elections and clean government free from corporate influence, that's either a right that we expect in Seattle or not. And so when you frame it really simply for voters, when the state, or if you think it's fascist, if other powers come in and try to take that away from a community once they've already decided that they want it a certain way, that is a really opportune organizing moment. It's a really opportune teaching moment. Now, in Pittsburgh, they have not passed this at the ballot. So the people of Pittsburgh have not said they don't want fracking. The city council, their representatives had said. That's one of the things that's special about this ordinance, is that we're taking it to the people of Seattle and giving them the opportunity to say whether or not they think corporations should be able to spend money on elections here. So thanks. Who else has been waiting? Sure, Kristen. So for people watching at home, what Kristen was saying is that if we're to connect the efforts that these organizations have undertaken in our community for a long time, that they're very valuable and make a big impact, and that we need to, if we're going to work with them, we need to talk about our values and meet them from that place, and that there's more than one method to changing the system, and that all these different options may be valid options. And so does that fairly, and like next week at the Green Party event, we're we're all on the same side. There's like 4 different groups doing parallel kinds of tracks, and it'll be really interesting. You know, there's no right or wrong. And I'm the first person to say, I don't know if this is the right approach. We may fail the first time and have to rewrite it and start over, but this is the effort that we've decided to step forward with now, because we feel like it takes it right to the heart of the issue and to raise discussion around the heart of the issue. Now, did you have a question as well beyond, did you want to make a second? Okay. Well, I'm really glad to see you here. I'm really appreciative that you came. In our state and in our city, we as citizens have the right to write law and try to pass it and make it law in our communities through the ballot. And that's what we're doing. And so we believe that when you take corporate personhood and corporate rights out of the equation and you take their spending on elections out of the equation, that our community will be healthier and more sustainable. And then we're trying to put that on the ballot for citizens to decide. So we're trying to give Seattle a chance to weigh in on this issue. And that's the way it works legally. We have the right. This is nonviolent reform, change. You know, when the Constitution was written, the word corporation doesn't appear in the Constitution. We legislated slavery, and women did not have the right to vote. And the way that changed was a lot of time, turmoil, and efforts, and lawmaking. And that's what we're trying to do here. Now, secondarily, do we think that this country probably could use more discussion that's well-rounded around corporate influence and power? Sure, certainly. And we hope to, both in the city and beyond the city, use this as an opportunity. We also hope other cities start to use this organizing approach, as is happening around the Northwest already. So it's not gimmicky. Like, we really are making law here that would outlaw these practices that we believe are harming our communities, but it also has these opportunities for change. And the way that this would work its way through the legal system is through more court challenges and cases, and that's okay. I'd much rather have 10 court cases fighting over rights for nature and protecting the environment than 10 cases of pollution going unseen and unreported. So I'd much rather have that happening transparently in a court of law.
So this doesn't necessarily counter Citizens United. It just states the values of the community into law.
It does counter Citizens United in the city of Seattle, in that corporations would not have personhood rights and would not have the rights to spend money on elections, which is what Citizens United's decision says that they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess the question is, so if this passes, then corporations are going to sue and say, well, that's unconstitutional.
Maybe they won't. In Pittsburgh, no corporations have challenged the community's ban on fracking. So
They might walk into Atlanta CNN and say, I want to buy so much airtime with these ads, and just because CNN also airs here.
That would actually probably be illegal under this ordinance. So Costco was advertised, spent $22 million on a statewide campaign, and they spent a lot of that money in Seattle. They probably wouldn't be, under this ordinance, if it passed, they probably wouldn't be able to advertise on the Seattle media market. That would probably be illegal. So the question was, if we did get it on the ballot, which we hope to, what will the opposition do? Who will they be, and what tactics? God, I don't know. I mean, I could make some guesses, but it's an election year, and there's a lot of issues and a lot of spending on a lot of different campaigns, and in that sense, there's some value that they won't have the bandwidth necessarily to organize quickly around this. It's likely that this wouldn't be on the ballot till early next year. So, your question is a great question. I'd just be speculating if I answered it. You can bet that there will be a lot of money brought to bear in ways that, after this ordinance passes, would no longer be legal. So it would be their last-ditch effort. I think as organizers, we have to use the energy that they bring to the campaign and the awareness that they build to raise awareness in the community about these corporate harms, about the harm of corporate spending. But it will be a real battle. So did that answer your question sufficiently? Yeah. Anne?
Who opposed it in Spokane?
I'm just speaking third hand, but I think about $400,000 came in from out of state in the last election cycle. The first time, actually, so it ran in 2009, and actually the city council, because Spokane's fairly conservative, the city council, one of the tactics they used was they put 3 other propositions on the ballot, and one of them well, I don't want to give our opponents too many ideas, but basically just to confuse the voters. Yeah, did you have a question back there? Let me address those two questions. So what was your name again? Ron. So Ron asked that there's so many specific provisions to this ordinance that I think you were saying that some people might be hesitant to sign, right? And that it's hard to explain. And then the second question you asked was, is it possible that this would be overturned by the courts because we have a single subject initiative rule in Washington State? Is that right? Okay, so this question comes up a lot. Let's see, there's several ways to think about it. Firstly, let me take the single subject issue first, because it's a legal question. I recently put a post on our blog, if you're interested, where I wrote out a longer response to this. But basically, the city attorney gets to summarize our initiative in a ballot title, and the ballot title is actually on every signature page. And the city attorney also believes that this is one single subject. They wrote, measure number 103 concerns local rights and restrictions on corporations to achieve those rights. So he agrees with us that this is a group of rights that are organized to restrict corporate power and elevate and to protect those restrictions. I've also done some research. It turns out that the courts in Washington have been had a wide deference to the single subject rule. They've only 91% of cases are decided in favor of the ordinance. So they rarely throw out ordinances unless they're wildly distinct in their topics. So we believe that this complies, and Spokane has run this initiative, a similar initiative, twice, and that was really a non-issue for them. And honestly, it doesn't matter until this gets passed by the voters, and we would then be defending it in court. So the second question is, how do you explain this to people? And I think Kristen's point about speaking from the heart, and my point about you don't have to explain everything. All you're asking people to do is, do you feel that corporate power in Seattle is hurting our community? Do you feel that corporations should be able to spend money on elections? Do you feel that corporations should be able to lobby our government in Seattle? Would you be willing to sign this so that the voters of Seattle have a right to decide these issues for themselves? I think trying to keep it simple is important. And then I'd also like to say that I don't know if combining these things was the right approach. I may be totally wrong, we may regret combining them, but I think that there's an opportunity that there's a lot of people in the community that may care about neighborhood rights, that may care about worker rights, that may care about rights for nature, that if we had just done a really small, narrow thing that just took away corporate personhood, that it might be too sterile for people, and its impact wouldn't really protect communities. These things work together, and so that's the thinking behind it. I can't say for sure, but I think that's my best answer. Does that answer your question? So anyone else have a burning question, or can we wrap up and let everyone talk amongst? Yeah, Elizabeth?
Do you have a media strategy?
Not formal media strategy yet. In fact, I haven't reached out to the media yet at all. Next week I'm going to be in court on Wednesday afternoon to ask the judge to change the ballot title so that I believe the current ballot title the attorney gave us isn't quite accurate, and so it's possible that once that decision comes down, we might start reaching out to the media to let them know about that court decision. But honestly, I'm just focused on let's get people to know about this. Let's get people talking about it. I want everyone in Seattle to have heard about I-103, to be talking about corporate power and whether it's a good or bad thing. And I believe that this ordinance makes law that really changes things, and I don't see other tactics that are changing the law. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this. So with that, I would just want to say thank you to Rich for hosting this and continuing to say that I'm the beauty of this operation. Feel free to stay and chat with each other. And again, the website is i103.org. We have petitions over here that you can sign, and we're taking photos of people signing with a little sign that says, I signed I-103, and we'll put those on Facebook. And we have these commitment cards over here. If you want to commit to getting 10 people to a house event, or 10 people to gather signatures, a signature page, or if you want to commit to gather them yourself, You can put those on the cards with your email, and I'll be in touch with you.
And one more. And on that side, you'll see there's an email sign up. If you want to know about the education events that we're going to be doing here, put your email on there, and that's all it will be used for.
Yeah, and there's a couple other people, Ann and Terry here from different groups that have events coming up that they wanted to share with people, so they may come up and talk to you, and they have some handouts as well. So thank you so much for caring about this issue and coming tonight.